I think it's recording. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna start with cars because I feel like I kind of just like figured that one out. I was doing like the question packs, and my tutor told me not to worry about any other cars like third-party resources like Jack Weston, UWorld because the logic is completely different and it's inconsistent. So if you try to use that logic that logic with the question pack, it doesn't align. And so that's where you can kind of see some like inconsistencies. But so I obviously was like my first two practice tests, I had a 126 and then a 125. And then I started going over the question pack. And this one I had a 128. And I would say the biggest thing that I saw with the question packs compared to like UWorld or like Jack Weston is that the answers, like the correct answer, almost like it kind of like stands out like a sore thumb. Like when you like take a step back and you look at it, it it's just different. So, okay, so let's do this first one because I ended up getting all these right. So, when I'm going through this, I like to highlight words that I think might be tested or just like it helps me like interact. And I also kind of, this one took me 5 minutes and 22 seconds to read and answer the first question. So this first one says, despite the grimly, or I guess you can pause and read this. Um, I'm also just gonna kind of look over it quick. Actually, we can just like we can break it down. Never mind. Okay, so despite the grimly predictable tragedies of armed conflict, almost all ancient and modern societies studied by anthropologists have engaged in at least periodic bouts of warfare. The ubiquity of organized fighting between human groups has fired up the scientific study of warfare. So, just from that, I know that this is going to be about the study of warfare with like ancient societies or like smaller societies. So current notions about the root of war stem mainly from studies of non-industrial societies lacking centralized political power and extensive military organization. All of these theoretical approaches focus on three themes. So we're looking at non-industrial societies, so that's like non-modernized societies. So like maybe like tribes or something like that. So they we were given three causes. The ultimate cause, so war that influence the goals people fight for, such as competition within a society for scarce resources and intense divisions between groups of related individuals. We have proximate causes of war, such as society's military preparedness and the goals of its leader, often centering on the desire for natural resources or control of trade routes, and consequences of war that influence further conflict, including population decline, improved access to resources, and increased prestige and power. So this one, we're looking at resources and tension between people within a related group. This one, we're looking at basically competition. And then this last one has to do with like power. So the we know we're going to be tested on those. Like we know like that's why those were provided. Like we're going to be tested on those. So we need to keep that in mind. Although some anthropologists and sociobiologists contend that a genetic tendency towards physical violence greases the human war machine, theories of innate aggression attract few advocates today. So this is saying that innate aggression is not a common theory for why humans create war. Nevertheless, disputes over alleged biological roots of combat continue to erupt. So if we're asked a question or we like any of the choices have innate aggression, that's where we can go back to that. That's why I highlighted that. Okay, so now we're getting into theories. So perhaps the most wide-ranging warfare study to date was conducted during the 1980s by Carol R. Ember and Melvin Ember. The team analyzed anthropological descriptions of 186 non-industrial societies, virtually all of which operated on a smaller scale than modern nation states. So, descriptions from the 18th century writing on Native American tribes to recent accounts of African hunter-gatherers. Two independent code readers or coders read the voluminous literature and rated the presence and frequency of warfare, aggressive acts, natural disasters, and other social and psychological factors, focusing on a 25-year period in each society. So this is just telling us the study. It's not telling us, you can almost treat this like a psych passage. Like it's telling us about the study and what they did. It's not telling us any correlations yet. So the Embers say that their finding offers a tentative war theory, so this is where we want to pay attention because I bet we're going to be tested on this. The societies that engage in the most warfare express considerably more fear of food oh my gosh, shortages caused by expected but unpredictable natural disasters. So we can almost think back. We saw that in one of our three reasons for war, such as drought, flood, or infestation. The fear of others, indicated by child rearing practices, stressing mistrust of neighbors, further fuels the tendency to fight, the researchers say. So that's giving us the results from their study. That's their theory. So, some researchers have suggested a penchant for warfare among societies with high levels of interpersonal aggression, as reflected in elevated rates of murder and theft. The Ember study showed no such links, so we need to know that. No such links, that's why I highlighted it. Parents in warlike societies do tend to encourage toughness and aggression among boys, but warfare apparently causes this practice rather than vice versa, the Embers argue. So they think that it causes, some people think that it encourages toughness and aggression, but Embers argue that it's the opposite. When societies lose wars and come under the control of outside forces, harsh child rearing methods diminish sharply, they found. That is information that we might need to answer something. So, war is not the natural human condition. Anthropologist R. Brian Ferguson says. So, we're probably going to be tested on this because it's bringing up somebody. Research shows that war varies over time due to factors such as trade, population growth, and outside contacts. Often, leaders must paint the enemy as inhuman in order to motivate people to kill, he says. And even then, many soldiers come out of combat with severe psychological after effects. We need to dispense the idea, or with the idea, that people love violence and are doomed to fight. So he's saying that's not like natural for humans to do. And that for leaders to get people to kill, they have to paint the other people as non-human or inhuman. So this is kind of how I approach this. So the answer to which of the following studies would be the most useful in determining the validity of the Ember study. So when we see this, we want to go, or I guess you don't have to, but we want to just focus on the study. We don't want to focus on um, anything else in the passage. So the study and probably the results. So I first off, when we're looking for validity, we're looking for um are there any like weaknesses in their study that we can maybe ask about. So, who determined the length of the period that would be covered in the study? So, that doesn't really have to do with like the goal of the study. So, we can just cross that one out. That's kind of like out of scope. Which Native American tribes were included in the study? That's not going to help us determine the validity of the study. So this is where it kind of got tricky. Were there any similarities between child rearing practices in warlike and non-warlike societies versus did societies that worried most about food shortages actually attempt to avoid them through war? So I'm just gonna go back up like into the passage to show you like we can find this. So their tentative theory so they're the like meat and potatoes of their theory is societies that engage in most warfare express considerably more fear in food shortages caused by expected but unpredictable natural disasters. And then we get into child rearing practices. But this is like their their like main part of their study. So Did societies, did the societies that worried most about food shortages actually attempt to avoid them through war? That would be valid. And then if we scroll down here, this is where we found it in um in the passage. So that's how I would pick this one because this was kind of like their main thing. This was kind of like an addition. Okay. And then, okay, so next, the information in the passage most strongly supports which of the following general statements. So when I'm looking at this, we're going to look at like main idea. And so first for A, we have war is inevitable because aggression is an inherent human trait. And we know that in the passage, they said that aggression is not an inherent human trait. So that also sounds a little like inevitable. Like that sounds really like strong. So it's probably not going to be that. War is a response to the need for food or other resources. That's pretty valid. Let's look at the next one. So, the more internally aggressive a society, the more likely it is to wage war on other societies. We know that humans don't want to start war unless they have to, and that aggression is not innate. So like A and B or A and C are kind of similar, so we can just like cross those out. Those seem like really strong. Okay. The study of warfare among non-industrial societies makes it easier to understand war in industrial societies. So this one can like it's kind of tempting to pick that, but war is a response to the need for food or other resources. Our like main idea is that people don't participate in war unless they have to. And B fits that better than D, because the purpose of this passage is not to study to make it easier to understand war in industrial societies. Like that's not the point of this passage. Okay, so like I said, we were probably going to be tested on the three reasons. So, given the information in the passage, the Embers theory about the cause of war would best fall into which of the following categories mentioned in paragraph two? Paragraph two. So, I'm assuming this is paragraph two. So, we know that again, the meat and potatoes of their theory on war is dealing with food shortages caused by expected but unpredictable natural disasters. So we're going to stick with that. And if we go up here, the only like theme that matches this is the ultimate cause of war because it literally says um, society scarce resources and intense divisions between groups of related individuals. So I'm seeing this like scarce resources. And if we look in these, so this has like natural resources, but it's like goals of its leader centering on desire for land. So it's more of like control. We're not talking about control in their theory. And then consequences. So this is power. We're not talking about power. They're not talking about power in their theory. So that leaves us only with the ultimate causes. Okay. So I kind of struggled with this one. The views of R. Brian Ferguson, final paragraph, are most similar to those of researchers who so link warfare with high rates of murder and theft. So he said that aggression is not innate in humans. C, contend that there's a genetic tendency towards physical violence. We didn't talk a whole ton about that. And then disagree with the Ember's findings, which that it doesn't feel right when you think about it because they're both saying that aggression is not like an innate feature in humans. And so when you kind of think about it like that, you can cross off D. And then we're left with believe that warfare causes parents to encourage aggression in their children. And where did we find this? So often leaders must paint the enemy as inhuman in order to motivate people to kill, he says, and even then many soldiers come out of combat with severe psychological after effects. So here his like theory or his like belief kind of strays from the Ember's findings. Like theirs is more on like food shortages and stuff like that. Um, and they also say that when societies lose wars and come under or harsh child rearing methods diminish sharply, they found. And again, this one's tricky because if leaders paint the enemy as inhuman to motivate people to kill, parents, as the leaders, will encourage aggression in their children. So there's kind of a link with that, and we can look at this. Yeah, paint the enemy as inhuman to motivate people to kill. Many soldiers come out with could lead to parents encouraging aggression. So, yeah, disagree with the Ember's findings. That's like it's a little too strong because they do have some overlap. Let's see what they said. Are similar to Ferguson's, for example, found that when societies lose this. Okay, like exactly like that. So, which of the following most reasonable inference that can be drawn from the information presented in the passage? So, it's probably going to be main idea. And we know that inevitable is a really strong word, and people don't want to start war unless they have to. And so, if you look at these, like, eliminated by uniting all societies under a governing council, that, like, makes no sense. Scientists now completely understand the reasons for war. That's also, like, not true because they have these theories and they're still trying to understand it. War is inevitable, which we know that's not true. And then it says people always find a good reason to fight. Like, that's also not true in what we read in the passage. So, war is not inevitable. People fight because of needs that could be met in other ways. That matches. Like, these three just like don't make any sense. Like, another thing I started doing is like I started slowing down when I was reading. And like I almost sometimes I fiddle with my hands because it like or I fiddle or I don't know, I do something so that my like brain can completely focus on the passage. 'Cause sometimes I like am like, oh no, I can hear the clock ticking or some, dumb shit like that, and then I get distracted. But if I found if I fiddle with my hands, I can focus on the passage better. So assume that societies with a high degree of conflict between internal factions tend to wage war more frequently than do cohesive societies. This information most strongly correlates with which of the following factors mentioned in the passage. So these are the factors. This, sorry, I have like a light that's like about to go out and it keeps flashing. So proximate consequences we know were like kind of control. This was like, or like this is like power. We know that proximate causes, what is it? Society's military preparedness and the goals of its leader. Like that doesn't make sense. Here it says intense divisions between groups of related individuals. So there's our answer. It's the ultimate causes of warfare. Is there one more? Okay, yeah. This is a long one. So one view of war is that it springs from fear of the unknown. People who are confident about their future do not declare war on their neighbors. Does this information in the passage support this view? And we know yes, because we know that natural disasters can be unpredictable, as stated in the passage. So right away, we can eliminate the no's. Like if we can see if it's yes or no, we can like eliminate half. Now we're down to like two answers. So, and then with yes, studies show that the innate tendency towards aggression leads societies to fear outsiders. That was not talked about in the passage because and they don't believe that there's an innate tendency towards aggression. They think it's like last resort. So, the Embers research suggests that fear of unpredictable disasters is at the root of much warfare. And that's right. Because again, if we scroll up here, it's literally stated right here. So, like, either, like, I struggled because I couldn't find stuff in the passage fast enough. And that's why, like, I had to slow down and, like, make sure I was actually understanding what it was asking. And then if you kind of just like take a step back from the answers, like you can see which ones like are like that's not it. Like that doesn't make sense. Okay. So now that we have that one done, maybe I can do I'll do let's do one of these. I want to find one that's more of like following like a pathway because I think those are a little trickier. This one I got wrong because I totally read it wrong. Okay, let's do this one. This one's actually not bad. Okay, so what I do is I highlight numbers and names of stuff that I think will be important. Again, that just like helps me go through it. So we know that this first paragraph, if you read it, you can pause and read. We know it's going to be about like the experiment, like what they did. So if we're ever asked about this in our questions, we go back to that paragraph. So a 2-to-1 ratio of moles of iodine to atoms of zinc. We know it's probably that might be asked about. That's why I highlighted it because again, we're just looking at the ratios because we're provided with like grams up there. I bet there's going to be something to do with moles. So then standard reduction potential for zinc, iodine, and two other substances are given in the table. So basically, we know this is going to be a question, something about like oxidation or reduction. And you don't even have to read, like when I was telling you that you can go through the questions on a passage, with just like glancing at the passage and be like, okay, well, like I already know what this is about. And this is one of those questions. So what type of reaction is occurring between iodide and zinc? Well, this passage is literally, it says reduction potentials. It's going to be oxidation reduction. We're not forming any, like, there might be precipitate formation, but like, that's not the reaction that's occurring. Chelate formation, that's like when like metal, when you have like a metal in the middle and you have like coordinate covalent bonds that like bond to it, like teeth. And then acid base, like we're not dealing with acid and base. So right away, like I don't even have to read the passage. I can literally look at this, like I can glance it, and I know this is going to be oxidation reduction. I spent 5 seconds on this question. Like that's how fast I knew. Okay. Oh, hold on. Let's go back. I got that one wrong. But like, okay, so that's like an example. Let's move to the next one. I don't know what I did with that one. Okay. So passage four, which is okay. So looking at this, we know we can see we have electrodes, voltage source. This is probably gonna be something with um, I don't know, voltage circuits. So if you need to take a second to read this. And then here I see we have like nanoseconds, electric potentials. Um, Here it's telling us about the electrodes, and it says it's spatially uniform electric field between two electrodes. Discharges gas trapped between the electrodes. Honestly, I don't think I even read this much. So, like, which temperature corresponds to the cold plasma used in the sterilized wound? Spent 53 seconds on this. I went up, I found 35 degrees Celsius, literally the only temperature that's given in this whole passage, and you just add 273 to it. And that's where you get C. Okay, so the period, so we're looking at the time it takes to do like one full oscillation. So one, this is like a wave, like, woof, like that. So this time it takes for us to have like a total displacement of 0. So we know that each of these is 500 nanoseconds. So you just add them together, and that's how you get C. So again, like that, it doesn't take that long. We didn't even have to read the passage to find that. Um, Maximum energy of UV photons generated by plasma pencil. So we're given speed of light, we're given Planck's constant, and we're looking. So the trick question here, because we're given UV radiation like nanometers, wavelengths, it says the maximum energy, and we know that maximum energy is going to correlate to a higher frequency, which is a lower wavelength. So we have to use this 200 here to find that. And then you can just plug that into your like E equals HC um divided by your wavelength. And I don't think I even did like I don't think I putzed around with the maybe I did. I don't know. That one you don't even like again, you don't have to read the passage. You can find where it says that many nanometers and then you can just solve it. So this is like a content. This is like this is like a discrete within a passage. So we don't even need the passage to answer this question. The electric field is uniform between the electrode, meaning that electric field lines. So we know that typically electric field lines are going to be they're technically like equally like spaced because the amount of work it takes to get from each equipotential line is equal between all of those. So that's how, like, that's just a general rule for electric fields. So for us to have the same amount of work, they have to be equally spaced. So that means the electric field lines are equally spaced at both electrodes and between them. So that's a uniform electric field. You don't even need to read the passage to know that. I think that was it for that one. That was a quick one. Let's go to this will be my last one because then I think I'm gonna go to bed. Um, I got something wrong in here. Some of these are pretty heavy. This one was a tricky one. I'm surprised I got those right. Um, okay. I mean, if you can, you don't have to watch this, but I'll just do this in case you want it. So, passage 9. So, we're given an introduction here about SSRIs, and then we're given enzymes involved in serotonin metabolism. So, we're probably going to be asked about that. I 100% bet you will be asked. Some people carry this mutation that encodes a form of tryptophan 5 hydroxylase, which is right here, and it's the rate limiting enzyme. So the mutation's telling us this. I like to highlight amino acids. I don't really care about how many people were depressed or not. Figure 2 shows the effect of the variant protein. So, based on the passage, which of the following ways is the action of serotonin on postsynaptic receptors most likely terminated? And so, again, you don't even need the passage to know this because this is also like a discrete within a passage. So, we know that neurotransmitters can be reuptaked, they can be um, degraded, or they can diffuse out of the synapse. And so the only thing that in these that only the only like answer choice of these that fit those three categories is going to be transportation of released serotonin back into the presynaptic terminal. So it's going to be reupt reuptook, reuptaked. I don't know. So, which of the following reasons most likely that 7 of the 9 clinically depressed patients with this mutant allele failed to respond to the highest doses of SSRIs? So, if we look up here, we know that the mutation is right here. So, if they can't create any of this, they can't even make serotonin, which is a big, big issue. Because SSRIs, like mentioned in the passage, they increase the time that serotonin is in the synapse. So when we look at these mutation of the serotonin receptor, that wasn't even talked about. Like it wasn't even mentioned. Produce an enzyme that degrades SSRIs before they can have an effect. That doesn't match with what we just talked about. form of depression in which postsynaptic receptors are constitutively activated, that would mean they'd be really happy all the time. So that's not true. So do not release enough serotonin, which totally makes sense with what we just said, if this is mutated. Which of the, oh, we just did this. Then switch. Okay. Drug inhibits the activity of which of the following enzymes would most likely relieve depression in some people, assuming chemical reactions in figure one are reversible. So we want to inhibit one of these to increase serotonin. So if we look here, we need these two. We should not inhibit those because serotonin is here. But if we look at this monoamine oxidase, we inhibit that, serotonin can't turn into this hydroxyindyl acid aldehyde. Yeah, so that's probably the answer. And that's what it is. SSRIs relieve depression by increasing, like we just talked about, the rate of serotonin synthesis in the presynaptic neuron. Um, or, oh wait, I totally mixed that up. The amount of time that serotonin is present in the synaptic space. So we don't care about the rate. We want the time that it's present because we don't want it to be uptook. And then which of the following conditions most likely contribute? Oh, wait, this is done. Okay, so that was that passage. If you ever want to go over more cars, let me know because I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it.